Here we go.
Here we go.
It's official.
Okay, all. It's official. Peter is gone. Welcome all. It is Monday night, Generational Change. I'm Jen.
I'm Peter, and I am still in Florida, but I may as well be in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Because that's how far away I technically am from where you are right now. If you were to draw a
not as the crow flies. Not as the crow flies.
That's true. But I am now in Matt Gaetz's territory. Completely different way of life up here in the Panhandle. I've only been here for a day, but I do like it up here. I will say that. People are very nice. But, it's a different way of life.
You know what? You've been living in South Florida. That's a very low bar. This is probably South Florida is probably the rudest place that I've ever been.
Well, that's one thing I could definitely tell you is completely different about an area like this. Just something as simple as going to the grocery store and not seeing a single cart just sitting on the side. People actually take their carts and put them in the proper place. It's the little things. It's things like that. But it's true.
It's true. It's people are more considerate of other people.
They are. I think we're considerate of other people. What do you think?
Well, I am, but I'm over considerate. Like I over consider. Like I consider everything. But like when you're talking about the shopping cart, when I'm walking back out to my car, I've already in my head figured out the best trajectory of how to deal with the shopping cart after and how I'm going to put my groceries away and what I'm going to do. So I over consider.
It'll be interesting. I've got a few things on the itinerary this week. We'll obviously discuss it at length going forward. There is a special congressional election taking place in this district. The primary election will take place in March. Whoever wins the primary, despite what
why do they bother even having a general election there?
Well, whoever wins the primary will win the general election by 30 points. That is the consistent number.
That's absurd. That's absurd. Honestly, that's such a waste of resources.
Well, that'll be a little interesting thing to get into with our esteemed guest. Yes. He was nice enough to have you on Breaking Points earlier this year when you were running against the devil woman herself, DWS. For those of you who didn't know that. But of course, he now has his own podcast, and we want to make sure that it is getting as much attention as possible because he is a real journalist, unlike, a lot of people out there. We won't name any names, but we certainly want to do our due diligence to support the 5149 podcast with James Lee, for the first time and definitely not the last time, we hope, welcome to Generational Change.
Hey, how's it going, guys? Good to see you again,
Good.
Jen.
How are you?
I'm doing well. And I just want to clarify really quickly. Technically, I don't have a podcast. It's more of I don't know what you call it, but it's just me putting together 3 minutes of something. And then I have a YouTube where I go into more like kind of a documentary style. You can see maybe a 15-minute kind of mini documentary where I dive into something, but maybe one day a podcast. Like
right.
Guys.
Well, I recently, the recent video that I saw was something you put out about RFK. And I was so appreciative because in many ways, like with Peter and I, like we happen to be fairly left. But when it comes to things like libertarian civil liberties, RFK, we're extremely reasonable. And I was very pleased that you were also very reasonable in your assessment, because there are definitely things I do not like about RFK. We've spoken about it. He is wrong on Israel. I mean, there's a lot of things, but to say that he wouldn't be good in this role is just unreasonable, right? Like that, it's just so obvious that he's better than any pharma tool that Kamala would put in, you know? So talk a little bit about that. Like what, because obviously you know, talking about Kennedy was important enough to make one of your bigger clips.
Yeah, I think so. Just because, you know, I see him as a figure who actually is one of the few people that Trump has nominated. There's a couple of these guys and we can go into it, but I think there's a couple of these guys that he's nominated that actually is somewhat of a threat to the existing order. And RFK Jr. is probably at the top of the list, in my opinion, just because of the things that he's come out against. He's not just, I mean, I know the mainstream media more or less just paints him as kind of this nutcase kook guy that is putting bears in Central Park, and he's got the brain worm, and he's also, you know, has the anti-vaccine stance. But there's a lot more that he's talked about that I think is actually going to be potentially very revolutionary in terms of the system that we have. He's talked about going up against big pharma, you know, stopping them from putting ads, basically buying the news, right? If you think about the news and why they even run ads, because I'm not going out and getting like Eloquist, you know, I don't think you know, those ads are just, they're ways to buy loyalty from the media. And he's also talked about like gutting the FDA. I know these are very like crazy. I mean, it is crazy in one sense, but it's not really that crazy, right? We've had other people, you know, on the left, you talk about like defund the police. That's a pretty provocative stance. Here he's talking about the FDA, and the FDA, it clearly has some problems where you have almost half of the funding comes from industry. So how can you possibly regulate an industry that pays you? So these are the things that I think are really, you know, and also on top of that, you know, you do just have the underlying issue of chronic disease that's increasing in this country. I think we spend the most on healthcare, but we certainly don't get the returns on it. So it's like, okay, what we're doing right now isn't really working. So what he's talking about potentially could work. And he is a big threat to that existing order of, you know, the pharmaceutical industrial complex. You mentioned the agri, you know, chemical industrial complex, putting all these pesticides on food. So that's kind of why I felt the need to make that piece. And I think it was important too, because a lot of people, you know, I kind of see, you know, the name of the channel, right? 5149. I kind of see myself as a figure who's somewhat kind of bridging the gap between all different, I would say ideologies in America, right? I'm kind of, because I kind of am able to see both sides of things, and I'm just like, okay, it seems like there's some things that they're right about, something that there's wrong about. Let me try to put together something, hopefully fair, still biased, but hopefully fair enough where people can like accept that message.
Oh, now, James, you're talking about things like nuance. You know, that is not something that the people on the tribal teams like. They don't do nuance. They're all or nothing, especially among Democrats on the left. Like, I definitely have, like, I'm done with them. I'm done with them. They are ridiculous. But, you know, and one of the main reasons why they are so ridiculous is because they fail to see any gray area of anything. And that is why we can't have nice things.
Yeah, there's a lot of reasons why we can't have nice things.
Right.
But,
no, I just mean politically amongst, I know, well, corporate money and the fact that they're all whores, that's a problem.
Yeah. And that was the video that I did before the RFK one that I did on YouTube. That actually was one of my big videos that I kind of hit a home run on is talking about kind of the evolution of a figure like Joe Rogan, who, if you look back just a couple of years, he was very much in agreement with a lot of the principles of the Democratic Party. You call it the left, you call it, liberalism, whatever. And he's talking about, things like gay marriage. He's talking about being, Michelle Obama being potentially a good candidate for president. And, what I saw was from that side of things, you were very much, if you didn't go along with every single thing that the party wanted you to do, you were almost just Hitler at that point. And so it really makes it a tough place for somebody kind of in the middle to say, if I'm good on 80, 90%, if I agree with you 80, 90% of the time, but I'm not all the way there with you. I don't agree that we should be doing, let's say, one of the top issues that he talks about a lot is like, I'm not all the way there with you in terms of like, hey, I don't know if transgender conversation should belong in middle school classrooms. I'm not there yet. Then you're kind of outcast, and it's almost like, okay, we have nowhere to go. And he also talks about how they just kind of quashed Bernie's whole movement and said, hey, this whole thing, you're kind of not welcome in our party. And so then where are these people going to go? The other side is, the Republicans, they've kind of, and this is, I could talk about this later too, because now you have kind of the new right that's happening, and it doesn't really gel well with the old right. So there's some interesting things happening there as well. But it's like one side is like, yeah, sure, join us. We have a big unity party thing. And I think that's like how, I think the Democratic Party is going to really have to do some retooling if they're to kind of come back from this.
What makes you think that they will?
That's a great question. Great question. I mean, I think
they will. He said that they need to.
Well, the difference between saying that they're going to come back versus, something as simple, excuse me, as Bill Clinton, who I still think he and his wife run the party in many ways, especially from a financial standpoint. I think that there were hooks that were put in so deep, basically into the ground with the Clinton Foundation and what they funded, and how the remnants of it is still immensely powerful even now, which is why Jen had said repeatedly over the past probably, at least the last month and a half of the campaign, that Kamala was running a Hillary 2.0 campaign, almost to a T. And the only way that happens is if Hillary really has a hand in it. And lo and behold, I'm sure you've seen the photograph. We much like Debbie admitting that the Democratic Party's sole mission is to crush progressives, and we always play that clip every once in a while. Well, we are going to be dropping this photograph every so often so that people are just reminded of who really is in control, who is pulling the strings. That is what it is on election night. When you could be sitting with anybody in the world, you're the Democratic Party nominee for president.
That's her handler.
Yeah, and in the moment of truth, she's sitting next to Hillary Clinton at her hotel in Washington, D.C. So to me, that really speaks to
why Hillary? Yeah. Because Hillary chose her when?
The summer of 2017.
Right.
Yeah, and it all comes full circle. And so I guess the question, James, as a journalist, is there any reason to believe that the Democratic Party, despite the fact that you could argue from now until the cows come home, Trump won in an electoral landslide. You want to say he won comfortably in the popular vote, but not a landslide popular vote? Whatever. He won, as far as I'm concerned, a mandate as president. Is the Democratic Party going to have any type of a come to Jesus moment? I don't believe they're going to. I believe that this is a party that is playing a very dangerous game with potentially going the way of the Whigs, because there is a real populist energy in this country right now, and they don't want any part of this establishment bullshit anymore because they realize it's bought and paid for.
I would say that I haven't seen any signs of that. I've been looking, right? And based on the sort of the post-mortem that I've seen out there from various people that are on the inside, it seems to be that they're not really grappling. There are voices within the Democratic Party who say, hey, we need to do this. We need to really think about representing the working class again, but they're not at the same level that you're talking about as high up in the party. I don't see anybody up there that's willing to do it. Now, I will say that their ability to come back kind of hinges on the Republican Party's ability to govern over the next 2 to 4 years, right? If Trump, if it's a mess, I think then automatically people will swing back this, to the right. Because there, like I said, there's a new right that's kind of this populist right that has emerged and has voted for Trump. The moving the Bernie to Trump pipeline, that is a real thing in my opinion. And so these guys, they're not like going to be sycophantic in terms of the pro-Trump stuff. If they see, I'm seeing this on Twitter, people calling out his cabinet picks, this and that. They're calling out, Kash Patel's Israel connection, and so like they're not totally, in my opinion, they're not totally like as cultish as maybe the media portrays the Trump crowd to be. So if he goes in and he doesn't do anything and he's basically the same, kind of neocon, if he's continuing these wars and he's shipping, billions of dollars overseas, I think you could easily swing back the other direction. So and also there's a lot of these guys. I don't know if you've been following the Mark Andreessen saga in the past few days, where he was on Rogan and he was talking about the CFPB, which arguably is one of those government institutions or government agencies that's actually designed to protect the people. And he's spinning it in a way where he's purposefully kind of conflating, that agency with the other ones that are like debanking people, because he doesn't like the CFPB because they shut his business down before. And so that's
it turns out that Andreessen was not following the law. So
yeah.
It's understandable.
So you have so then if this continues, I think people will see through and say, hey, these guys are actually just hijacking the Trump moniker and trying to do whatever they want to do. I saw a funny meme the other day. It said like everything to Mark Andreessen, everything that will prevent me from making money is woke, because he's kind of just throwing the woke thing everywhere. It's like, doesn't make any sense. So that's a guy that I would be very distrustful of in terms of his ideas, because I think there are some kind of guys that I would listen to in the billionaire class that may have some good ideas. I personally, from what I've seen, I don't think he's one of them. I have to, obviously it's still very fresh. He's not a guy that I would trust, to be honest. So if they don't do well, I could definitely see, long story short, to bring it back to the point you're talking about, I could see the Democratic Party, just coming back, just because people always are between these two parties, because they're always not giving us, it's always the choice of the lesser evil. So now, the country's gone to shit. Okay, the Democrats come back, but have they offered anything truly different? Probably not, but they could still win. I mean, I think if you look down ballot, the Democrats didn't do that badly. I think almost every representative or senator outperformed Kamala by like 5 to 8 points. So I mean, they just ran a really, really bad top of the ticket. But you have people, Nevada, I think, right? What was that guy's name in Nevada? I can't remember his name for Senator Rosen. I think Gallego was in Arizona. I think he won. Yeah, Gallego won in Arizona. Also, I think Jackie Rosen won in Nevada as well.
That's correct.
And Kamala lost both those states quite handedly. So I think the people that we're just left with like such poor choices at this point. I definitely see ability for the Democrats to come back. But if Trump does 25% of what he's going to do, it's going to be tough. I think if he actually does a couple of populist things, it's going to be tough.
I mean, I think Arizona was a little bit of an outlier because of the fact that Gallego was a sitting congressman and he was pretty popular. And I mean,
he was up against Carrie Lake.
Yeah, Carrie spent the last 2 years claiming that her election was rigged, and it's like that's like the one thing that people have said time and again that doesn't work. Like there are a lot of people who question the integrity of elections in our country. I certainly do, but there is a way to go about it by actually engaging people the right way to make them realize that it's like when Trump said that the election was rigged in 2020, it's like he said it was rigged, it's rigged. And it's like, well, you didn't say the most important part of why it could technically be argued that it was rigged. Google made a conscious decision in terms of how they were going to filter the algorithm. And it's like, okay, well, they're telling you that this is how it's done. But Google is the most powerful corporation in the world. So if you're not going through the throat, then what is the point? It's much like, Doge, if you will. It's amazing that this is, I'm free. I admit I invest in Doge. So it is what it is. I'm not going to say that I don't. But if you're going to do this, if Elon and Vivek are going to do this, and you're not going to, go after the most wasteful government entity in the country by far, which is the Pentagon, then I don't want to hear it. It's, either you're going to go for the actual problem or you're going to continue to facilitate the end of the American Republic. because that's kind of what it feels like is happening, at least where Jen and I sit. It does seem like the system is breaking at the seams in many ways.
I would say that is a big concern, right? Is Doge really about cleaning up the government, or is just removing everything? It's just saying, hey, there's going to be kind of no rules and we're going to make the rules. So that's remains to be seen, right? Because they are saying there's some points that they make that I would agree with, like even Bernie, right? I think he tweeted yesterday that says, hey, if you're talking about Doge, we need to clean up the Pentagon because they've never passed an audit. So this is one area. Let's go in and clean it up. Now, if they're willing to do that, I'm all fine with Doge. But if Doge is just about things like, demonizing the CFPB, which is, like I said, one of the few agencies that works on behalf of people and actually protected people from being debanked, even though they had political positions that were very, unpopular, then, we could be in some trouble. I don't really know. I mean, I hate to be very hyperbolic in terms of, the Republic is collapsing, but it certainly, Doge would not be what they sold it to be. I'll just put it that way.
Yeah, I think oligarchs are going to oligarch. And so to me, the idea of putting someone like Elon Musk in charge of anything, for him, everything is self-serving. Everything is self-serving. So the only way that he's going to, and I don't see someone like him who probably wants contracts or has contracts with the Pentagon and different stuff. Who the hell knows? I don't know. I mean, it's like for him to be looking at things, they're only going to be things that don't benefit him. That's what I think. And I think Vivek is just smarmy. He's just he's a climber. He's just a climber.
Well, you've been saying you think he's the first one voted off the island.
I think he'll be the first one because I think he'll butt heads with Trump. I think Trump has to always be right. He has to always be the smartest person in the room. He will not, nobody can take his thunder. And I think that Vivek has an ego on him. And I do think that that'll eventually cross Trump and that will go. And like I said, Trump's favorite thing in the world is firing people. So none of those people, in my opinion, will make it a year. Now, who gets voted off first? My money's on Vivek, but it could really be any of those people.
Well, speaking of billionaires who claim to be doing something one way, but they're really doing it another way, we do have the clip from the Rogan podcast, the Joe Rogan Experience, regarding debanking with Mr. Andreessen, who, as you will see, wasn't being completely honest.
For example, with this thing called the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau, CFPB, which was it's sort of Elizabeth Warren's personal agency that she gets to control. And it's an independent agency that just gets to run and do whatever it wants, right? And if you read the Constitution, there is no such thing as an independent agency, and yet there it is.
What does her agency do?
Whatever she wants.
What does it do, though?
Basically, terrorize financial institutions, prevent fintech, prevent new competition,
Well, you could see that he had to think about that for a second. But what is he doing again? Oh, yeah, right. They're preventing us from completely taking over the world.
I love how he says it's her. He makes it sound like it's her personal, Gestapo. It's just ridiculous to me that he's talking about it this way, because I am by no means a Liz Warren fan, but that is one of the things that she's done that's really good. So it's just it's just weird to me. This is so strange.
Oh, let's see what else this Looney Tune has to say.
Startups that want to compete with the big banks.
Really?
Oh, yeah, 100%.
How so?
Just terrorizing anybody who tries to do anything in financial services.
Can you give me an example?
Well, I say, debanking. This is where a lot of the debanking comes from, is these agencies. So debanking is when you as either a person or your company are literally kicked out of the banking system.
Like they did to Kanye.
Exactly, like they did to Kanye. My partner Ben's father has been debanked.
Really?
We had an employee who
for what?
For having the wrong politics, for saying unacceptable things. Under current banking regulations, here's a great thing. Under current banking regulations, after all the reforms of the last 20 years, there's now a category called a politically exposed person, PEP. And if you are a PEP, you are required by financial regulators to kick them off of to kick them out of your bank. You're not allowed to have them.
What if you're politically on the left?
Well, that's fine.
No,
because they're not politically exposed.
So no one on the left gets debanked?
I have not heard of a single instance of anybody on the left getting debanked.
Could you tell me what the person that you know did, what they said that got them debanked?
Oh, well, I mean, David Horowitz is a right wing. He's pro-Trump. I mean, he's said all kinds of things. He's been very anti-Islamic terrorism. He's been very worried about migration, all these things.
So I like how he throws in, well, he's very anti-Islamic terrorism, aka he's very pro-Israel, and he's He's getting.
I still don't understand why he's claiming this, and hopefully Joe Rogan takes like 5 seconds to like do some research, but I don't understand. So, and we're supposed to believe that people lose their banking privileges just because of their political beliefs?
That does happen, but it's not the CFPB who does it. So, because I think based on what I know about this situation is that he personally has had several businesses that basically he's scamming, you could say, his customers, and the CFPB came in and stopped that. So I think he has a personal vendetta against the CFPB because it prevents him from doing the things that he wants to do to make money. And now even then he talks about, he's conflating agencies. He's like, these are what these agencies do. Now, all these agencies do different things. The CFPB is specifically there to protect consumers. And I've read numerous people like Lee Fang came out and said, no, the CFPB actually prevented the debanking of folks who, were on the right or the ultra Christian nationals, these kinds of people. They actually stepped in and said, no, you can't be doing that. So it's actually the complete opposite of what he's saying. And I think what he's doing is, he's a very smart guy. People have come out to defend him, saying that he actually conflated two different things and he misspoke here. But I don't think he misspeaks. He's like one of the top venture capitalists in the country. There's no way that he's doing this on accident. And also, to your point, Steve, I think even Joe Rogan's sort of follow-up questions kind of had him taken aback. Joe Rogan, basically all he said was like, what do you mean by that? Give me an example of that. And he's already kind of on the back foot a little bit.
All right, we'll finish it out.
And they debanked him for that.
Yeah, they debanked it. So you get kicked out of your bank account. You get kicked out of you can't do credit card transactions. But by the way, you can't
How is that legal?
Well, exactly. So this is the thing. And then you go in this thing of like, well, this is where the government and the companies get intertwined. Back to your fascism point, which is there's a constitutional amendment that says the government can't restrict your speech, but there's no constitutional amendment that says the government can't debank you, right? And so if they can't do the one thing, then they do the other thing, and then they don't have to debank you. They just have to put pressure on the private company banks to do it, and then the private company banks do it because they're expected to, but the government gets to say we didn't do it.
Do you think Rogan is under a certain amount of obligation to at least be able to question his guests when they bring up certain topics like this that clearly he was not versed in very well?
I don't know Rogan at all personally, or I don't know how his brain really works, but I do know that he does ask. I think those are pretty good follow-up questions to say, hey, give me an example of what you mean by debanking. And he, came up with basically an example that didn't apply, right? He's talking about like Kanye and all these other things that doesn't make any sense. Like Kanye wasn't, I don't think he was even really in that situation. But I do think that Rogan is in this kind of sphere where he feels so, kind of abandoned by the people who he once kind of aligned with. And this is, he's kind of in this world now. If you're in that ecosystem, you start to really believe what these guys are saying. And you believe that it's a good thing. And also Rogan is, he banked like $700 million from his Spotify deal. So he's not exactly working class, anymore. Or if he were considered at some point. But so I think, it's not, Rogan is not like a news. I give Rogan, a lot of passes in the sense it's like, it's not a news show. He's just having a conversation. And it's not on him to know the ins and outs of the CFPB, right? It's not technically his responsibility, but, I hope that he is then listening to other people to say, hey, Mark here was not making any sense at all, just to, I know there's other people around him that are smart that
I hope so. Because that's what I'm saying. Like, I have no problem with him not being a journalist because he's not a journalist. He doesn't claim to be a journalist. And I have no problem with him platforming all sorts of different people and different viewpoints. But when you're bringing on someone that has their own agenda, well, everyone does, to some extent. But you would think that you would at least question what they're saying and not necessarily support that like it's some sort of gospel.
And I think he did. I honestly think he did there because he was like, what do you mean by that? And then Mark, knowing, I think, what Rogan point of view is coming from, then he started giving examples of like, oh, because of your political beliefs, they can debank you. And Rogan's obviously like, oh my God, because he fears this, I'm sure. And so he's using examples that he knows that will resonate with him to kind of skirt by the point of, hey, this is not really what the CFPB is meant to do. So I think, I mean, I think Mark is a very smart guy. So he knows what he was doing there. And you know, for me, I'm a free speech guy. So I'm like, okay, so he says that on there, and then we'll say something else in response to that on X or Twitter. And I wrote a whole thread about Andreessen a couple days ago, where I looked up, you know, he's part of this consortium of like kind of secret, you know, billionaires that are buying, you know, 55,000 acres of land in Northern California to turn it into this city. He's also invested heavily in this, I guess, surveillance, you know, military surveillance technology. And I'm like, dude, this guy just wants to kind of control what people's, you know, movements are. You know, they say it's like kind of you know, what are they, utopian thing that they're trying to do, but it seems like just kind of surveillance from a non-governmental agency. All the things that are piecing together, it doesn't seem like he's wanting, you know, liberty and freedom and all these things that they talk about. If you look at where his investments go, he's also invested in Adam Newman's new venture, Flow. I don't know if you guys have looked into that, but I did a whole video on that earlier this year, where I actually visited that property and saw what the heck it was about. But he's building this new, you know, after WeWork right now, is this new venture is like residential housing, but it's all like cool, and it's some sort of like community, and people will have ownership, except ownership is not really ownership. So it's all very, you know, kind of, I don't know, we just kind of tech babble.
Just like old friend of the show, Carol Roth, with her book, You Will Own Nothing and You Will Enjoy It. It's like,
yes, it is very much in that sense.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I wrote about. I was like, I don't think Andreessen is who he says he is. And I have more that I'm probably going to write up on Andreessen in the next week or so, because, you know, I think people now in power, we should hold them accountable right now. These guys, because I think I went pretty hard at the Democrats in the last, you know, 2-3 years, but they're about to not be in power anymore. So if these are the guys in power, I'm going to look into them and say, hey, this guy seems sketchy. I don't think you should trust what he's saying, and here's why.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. And then you flip it around to the other side, and you realize that what the Democratic Party does constantly is they always want to point the finger at the other side and claim the higher ground. See, we're the better people. We don't do things like this. We're the honest operators. You just can't see it, even if your wallets are completely empty. So that sanctimony at the top of the party, primarily, there's no question that, you know, Kamala ended up doing very poorly in many ways. The party was able to not get completely blown away, even though a lot of the elections were close. But I do think that there is sort of this referendum on the party itself. I think people hate both parties almost equally. I just think Trump is a very unique person in this moment, as I'm sure you would agree. And the judicial attacks that came down on Trump, I felt for the most part, were completely manufactured and partisan and political in their nature. I had maintained for the longest time that if you were going to go after Trump for anything, you go after him on the emoluments clause. It's so obvious that he violated that during his first term with his very, very cordial relationship with the Saudis, which ultimately led to a murder, among other things that we know about. And that, to me, was an easy get. But the only reason you don't go after him for that is because they all do it. That's the thing. It's this whole thing about why didn't Nancy Pelosi ever bring Ro Khanna's bill to the floor about ending insider trading? It's obvious because they all do it, especially our congresswoman, although now my congressman is up in the air. It was Matt Gaetz, but, you know, we'll see what happens in the next few months. But Jen is still saddled with Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who could never stop. Didn't know what to do with her life if she couldn't do insider trading. How would she ever maintain her very lavish lifestyle? But I digress. The point is, all this time,
you could do a couple trips to Israel, probably.
Oh, well.
Oh, she does. That woman has not missed a delegation to Israel ever.
She doesn't miss an opportunity to take a photo op with Netanyahu. So that just goes to tell you how committed she is. Very committed. And so all this time, we hear constantly from the Democratic Party establishment all the way up to the president that nobody is above the law. Well, this happened today.
The American principle that no one is above the law. The justice system should be respected, and we should never allow anyone to tear it down. It's as simple as that. That's America. That's who we are.
Yeah.
And that's who we'll always be, God willing. This nation was founded on the principle that there are no kings in America. Each of us is equal before the law. No one is above the law, not even the President of the United States.
Will the president pardon or commute his son if he's convicted?
So I've answered this question before. It was asked of me not too long ago, a couple of weeks ago, and I was very clear, and I said no.
Hey, let me go back to the first question of the briefing. I know you said not a lot's changed since yesterday and that it's a personal matter, but from a presidential perspective, is there any possibility that the president would end up pardoning his son?
No. It's still a no.
It will always be a no.
It's still a no. It will be a no. It is a no, and I don't have anything else to add. Will he pardon his son? No.
And I am satisfied that I'm not going to do anything. I said I abide by the jury decision. I will do that, and I will not pardon him.
But let me ask you, will you accept the jury's outcome, their verdict, no matter what it is?
Yes.
And have you ruled out a pardon for your son?
Yes.
But in all fairness, Joe probably can't remember any of those things that he said.
No. So,
however, what's her name? Jean-Pierre? Is that her name?
Corinne,
yeah, she's disgusting. So, I have to pull her up because she's one of my war criminal cards, guys. She's in here. She is the 10 of clubs. For people following this, this is it's thewarcriminals.com. Get yourself some cards, supports Palestinian children, medical care and treatment. But yes, every time somebody comes up in my war deck, I pull them out. So 10 of clubs.
Love it.
Just saying. Okay.
So, of course, for anybody who has been paying attention, there's a little bit of hypocrisy in the air because, as we know, the Democrats often will say one thing and they will do another thing, which should not come as a surprise to anybody. And ultimately, the president of the United States changed his mind. He pardoned his son, Hunter Biden, earlier. Where I think the bigger issue is here, James, is the context of the pardon itself. The pardon itself, apparently, from what we're reading, is that it extends all the way back to 2014. So it's like a blanket pardon. Basically,
it's like this complete retroactive pardon to everything.
Mm-hmm. And the whole point about this is it almost comes full circle on this idea that the reason why that the Democratic establishment, whatever you want to call it, went after the president of the at the time, Donald Trump, and impeached him was because he was looking into the Biden's activities within Ukraine, led by Hunter Biden, who sat on the board of Burisma and was getting paid $30,000, I believe, a month, to not do anything. I mean,
how can I get that job? How do I get that job? How do I get a job like that?
Be born on third base. That's a good start.
All right. Well, that's not happening because that's a great job, man.
Yep. And so now the whole point of this pardon is to basically say, not only is Hunter untouchable, but you cannot go after any of the previous activities that we did. You know, the whole thing about taking Trump through the ringer in court in 4 different states and a lot of it being completely overblown, especially what happened in New York. Yeah, we're making sure that you can't do that back to us. Although I don't think Trump really cares one way or the other. I think this makes the Democrats look even worse than they possibly could, even though I don't think it's anybody's surprise that he ultimately decided to pardon his son.
Yeah, I don't think this is. I mean, I think this will be kind of the nail in the coffin for Joe Biden, in a metaphorical sense. I don't know. He's
close there, James.
But yeah, I just don't know. I mean, obviously, like as a father to a son, we can kind of empathize with what he's trying to do there. But why do you go out and say all of these things before, right? Just be like, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I'm going to. I think they thought they were going to win because if they win, they're not going to prosecute, which means that the DOJ ultimately is weaponized, right? It necessarily means that they choose to go after based on who they want to, not based on whether or not they've committed crimes to the degree where the DOJ should go after them.
Well, we knew that, right? I mean, we knew that.
Well, as Governor Jared Polis, who I'm sure has his eyes on bigger and better opportunities going forward, he did say this is a bad precedent that could be abused by later presidents and will sadly tarnish the president's reputation. While he can sympathize with Hunter Biden's substance abuse struggles, no one is above the law, not a president and not a president's son. Well, I guess that's not true. I'm not really one to get too upset about things like this, because I think if you've been paying attention for the past decade, you can see just how corrupt and rigged the system really is. Like, this shouldn't surprise people. This shouldn't surprise anybody that a lot of what is happening in Ukraine, which I have maintained for the longest time, is because Western Ukraine, which I've been saying for how long, Jen, has some of the richest minerals on this planet that anyone would want to get their hands on today, tomorrow, and for many years to come. And when good old Lindsey Graham lets it out of the box and says, you know, there's $2 to $7 trillion worth of natural resources in Western Ukraine, and I'm thinking, yeah, I've been saying that for a while. You finally decided to admit the truth. Why do you think BlackRock is so hell-bent on controlling as much territory within the state as possible once this war ends? It should not.
Do you think that's more effective, Stephen, messaging when you say something like that nakedly?
Peter.
Oh, sorry, Peter. Sorry, not Stephen.
You know what's
Peter,
funny?
My bad.
We've had guests on the show before that have called me Stephen as well. You're not the first one, so this is actually happening.
I apologize, Peter.
Don't worry about it. I just think it's funny that you happen to say the same name.
You look like it. I don't know. I guess.
Well, all right. So I'm going to let you off the hook for this reason, because I have been told how long, Jen, that I look like Stephen Buscemi.
Steve Buscemi.
Like I have been getting that for long
forever.
Time. Yes. So I do think that it's fair to say.
Now that you say, you know what, I'm going to say that's.
How do you do, fellow kids?
Oh.
That's always the best one. That one works out pretty well.
No, that was good.
What is your?
What I was going to ask you,
it
was that. Do you think that messaging is more effective when he just says the thing out loud? When he says, "Yes, we're going after the minerals, the all these rare earth minerals." It's more effective than just saying, "Oh no, this is a thing because of democracy, and we need to help save democracy in Eastern Europe, this and that." When that's clearly not the case. When they just say it more effectively, or more directly, people are like, "Okay, well, maybe we should get these minerals. Let's do it."
Well, look, Trump, I remember when he admitted that we were in Syria for the oil. We got the oil. And I was so pleased. I'm like, thank you.
That's not what he said.
Thank you for your candor, kind sir.
He said,
like, I really.
We got to go after the oil.
No, but it's like, that's what freaks out the establishment Republicans, is that he really does say the quiet part out loud a little too often. But I personally prefer that because I know it anyway. So it's just, and it's nice to realize that maybe other people will eventually learn this too.
Listen, I want to see the establishment crumble in both parties just as well. The one thing I am appreciative for one reason with the GOP establishment, and only one, because as far as I'm concerned, I would support Trump and his mission much faster than I would ever support Mitch McConnell's. Now, if people want to disagree with me on that, that's fine. But I've seen enough to know what I would prefer versus what I wouldn't. I will say this, though. How anybody has a blind spot at this point for Rick Scott is simply beyond me. How you would ever allow that mass murdering bastard to obtain one of the highest positions in all of government as the Senate Majority Leader? Are you fucking insane?
Wait, he didn't get it.
He didn't, but they wanted him to get it. And the fact that he didn't get it, I think, speaks to the very few within the GOP that still have some semblance of a liberal streak, aka Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski. And even and there's like one other one that I'm forgetting, but as small as it may be, the fact that you blocked Rick Scott, be thankful that you did, because you really do not want to know how bad the world can get if that man ever obtained that kind of position. He's going to very likely run for president at some point, and that should scare people.
That could keep me up at night. truthfully.
Like the idea that Rick Scott, the idea that Rick Scott is anything but the establishment, pretending to be part of the outsiders in the MAGA movement. How anybody could even be taken for a ride with that is unbelievable. But as I often say, we are still just commentators on the outside looking in. We have absolutely no idea whether Trump actually was just doing a misdirect and said, I totally don't want Rick Scott. Who knows? But thankfully, he didn't achieve that power. Now, do I think that there will be ramifications for Biden's decision? I mean, I do think that this kind of gives Trump a wide open opportunity to basically pardon every single member of January 6th, and I think he probably will. What do you think?
I don't know. I mean, I think here's where I stand on the January 6th thing. I think it's a kind of a nuanced issue, is that like we have to look at it in a broader context of like what actually happened, because I'm one of those people where I don't know if this is going to be controversial to say, but I'm not really even sure what the truth is about what happened that day, right? There's a lot of conflicting videos that are coming out of like people being let in. Are those guys committing the same level of crime as somebody who bashed in a window? What is happening here? And so I'm not sure like we even know the full truth about what happened that day, because there does seem to be some kind of obfuscation of some videos that are being leaked, or some videos that they put together to create a certain narrative around that particular day. And that's kind of where I am. I don't know much beyond that. So it's hard for me to say whether or not he's going to pardon every single one of those people. I think, I don't even know what the sentencing of a lot of those people are, to be quite frank, because I haven't looked into it. Is it a long time? I don't know, but it certainly would score him a lot of points in terms of his base, and also it shouldn't. Then the Democrats won't really be able to critique that too much, because they say, well, they'll just point to the Hunter Biden thing and say, well, look at you, pardon your son. So of course we're going to pardon these American patriots. Yeah, I think that's going to be a very effective messaging, and it's I don't think there's going to be a lot of blowback at all.
Yeah. I don't need, and you know what? If Trump were to do that, it wouldn't happen until the end of the presidency. And at that point,
do you guys like who? I guess my question: do you guys know like what these people are in for? Like how long?
No, to me, I actually am glad that you said that, because I have not ever found a completely clear story on any one defendant from start to finish in terms of what they did, I haven't, but I haven't really been following it. But I would think there's definitely a range of people. So to me, there's a big difference between people that were just there versus people that hurt people. There's a difference between somebody who is just walking in with everyone else and somebody that actually physically hurt somebody. So I think there's a range. And that's the other thing, how I feel about the Hunter Biden stuff, because to me, the kind of stuff we're talking about, to me, they all do that all the time. Like, that's like Martha Stewart going to prison for insider trading. This is ridiculous. So that's why now, if Hunter Biden was a dangerous person and hurt people, like was dangerous and could like hurt people and whatever, that's different. And so for me, that's just, but I'm also an abolitionist. So, I'm not the right person to be asking about this in general, but I think that what Hunter Biden did, and given whatever I've seen of him, first of all, he doesn't strike me as the sharpest tool in the shed. And so if that's the case, then that lends itself for me to believe that anything that he's done has been done 10 times over better by many other people throughout history. And he just got busted, which then is one of those things like, I mean, I don't know. I just feel like right now we're watching a genocide happen.
Yep.
And when we're talking about these kinds of things, it's just not reaching that point to me. And neither the January 6th stuff doesn't either, by the way.
Yeah, I think that January 6th is important for just how far people are willing to take a matter that I thought was bad to begin with. I mean, listen, it looked bad. I remember when I saw it, and it was, it is what it is. But you cannot deny that there were feds in the crowd that were definitely encouraging people to breach the Capitol. They were encouraging it. And while there were at least 100,000 people that showed up that day, I remember how big that crowd was. It was substantial. And at the end of the day, how many people went inside? A couple hundred people, if that many actually got inside.
I mean, we're talking about the guy stealing the podium.
Yeah.
Like, are we going to like lock him up at Guantanamo? Like what the shaman hat? Like, I don't know. I feel like they were just ridiculous.
And it's also very true that we have so many problems in this country that that's all they ever wanted to talk about. And, we've said time and again, it's not like they showed up with AK-47s. They just showed up. And the fact that we turn this into something so substantial when at the same time, we don't have a living wage. We do not have health care. We have unsafe water to drink. We have endless war and a planet that's on fire. And we, of course, don't have the type of infrastructure that the Biden administration is going to claim that they passed and was actually helping.
People are literally freezing in North Carolina because FEMA has not provided what they need post hurricanes. And these people are living in tents and it's like 20 degrees. So, and that's completely a Biden thing. This is completely not all FEMA, because FEMA was defunded and all of that. It goes back. I get it, blah, 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 blah. But come on. Yeah. If you're sending money, and again, I don't think it's like one little pie, but we're sending how many billions of dollars to Israel or Ukraine, and somehow the people in North Carolina can't get temporary housing.
Yeah, I did videos on that. Yeah, they got whatever the $700, and people said, "Oh, there's going to be more people." I got a lot of heat for putting that video out because people are like, "No, this is just the first wave of money." And I'm like, "Okay, go call the people up in Maui and look at how many waves and
exactly.
what cash." They didn't get anything because I went out there personally to Maui to talk to people, and they're like, "No, we haven't gotten anything. We're getting evicted, even though there's an eviction moratorium. People are getting evicted, and the government hasn't done anything." And so that just like. I don't mind corruption necessarily. This is going to be a little controversial. I don't necessarily mind corruption if you take care of your own people, right? You look back at The Wire, right? If you look at season 2, the shipyard guy, he was corrupt, but he was taking care of his union people. So at least you're doing something for your own people. Here, we're people in the United States can't afford to live. And then one campaign is like, oh, this is so joyous. You just, the economy's so good. You just don't know how to read the chart right. The chart, you don't understand the chart. The chart's good. And then we're shipping all this money overseas. And that's where I think the disconnect comes from, where people get real frustrated and gaslit is like, no, I don't think my life is good. The eggs are expensive and these kinds of things. And we can't afford to fix the roads and the bridges. And I looked up the other day, 26% of our road or bridges will collapse in the next 20 years if we don't do anything about it. And we're still, all this money because of the whole BlackRock, it's just going over there. And that's kind of where people just are frustrated. They're like, screw it. I'm done with this whole thing. I'm out. I'm checked out. And I think that's where I think a lot of the progressive movement has kind of lacked, because they're not willing to go to this kind of revolutionary, in order to get what we want, we have to ruffle some feathers. And I think the top of if you're looking at the top of the progressive food chain, like the AOCs, they're not willing to do that. So if you're not willing to do that, you're not going to get people behind you. You're going to get people to go to the other side who are saying, oh no, we're going to install people in here. We're going to break the system. We're going to get, the Kosh Patel's in there and he's going to dismantle the FBI and blah, blah, blah. That sounds, they're actually, it's like, oh, they're going to do something. At least they're, okay, whatever. If you disagree with their, maybe they're what they're trying to do, but they're doing it.
And that's how people end up dead. I actually am concerned for RFK safety, just going after big pharma and big ag. But when you talk about the last person who tried to dismantle the deep state got dead. And so that does not go over well. That's what I'm saying. So to me, it's like, I appreciate it. It's a lofty goal. Good luck to you with that. Like, I'm with you in spirit. Good luck with that. That's how I feel about it. And I don't even mind the idea of them going after the Department of Education and things that are not functioning and are not serving and are definitely not leveling the playing field around the country and doing what it's supposed to do by any stretch. So those kinds of things don't bother me. But to say you're going after those people, I don't know. I just don't see how that ends without somebody having concrete attached to their ankles.
And I am totally fine with them going after the Department of Education so long as you are going after the Pentagon. You can't have one and not the other, and especially that one. Like, there is absolutely no excuse for that whatsoever. And high crimes and misdemeanors are always things that seem to happen And they always happen at the same time on both sides, which is why, while everyone, of course, rightfully so, is focused on the president pardoning his son, there is also this wonderful doozy that I know you know about that happened earlier today as well. And that, of course, is the Papa Kushner was given an opportunity of a lifetime.
Oh, well, explain to people why, like the importance behind who is Jared Kushner's father? Who is this?
Who is Mr. Charles Kushner?
Yes. He's good looking.
Charles Kushner, Donald Trump's nominee for ambassador to France, is the father of Trump's son-in-law and a former real estate mogul. Trump pardoned for an earlier conviction on tax evasion and charges involving a revenge plot to set his brother-in-law up in a sex scandal. That's sweet.
That's nice. Wait, that's the father that he's talking about? Okay, nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah. He produced.
It's amazing what a pardon can do. It gets you a nice ambassadorship.
Oh, absolutely. By the early 2000s, Kushner Companies had become one of New Jersey's, because, of course, it's my home state, largest apartment owners, and the firm had a portfolio spanning 25,000 units. By the way, you know, you talk about what RFK is doing regarding the FDA and just trying to take on big agriculture and big pharma. Let's not forget that I thought the most important aspect of his presidential run was addressing the fact that we have a private equity crisis of the highest order when it comes to housing in the United States.
Oh, yeah.
Particularly BlackRock.
That shit's got to stop. That shit's just got to stop. And
I'm surprised that didn't get him dead. That's a very, you know, so when you talk about owning 25,000 doors, you know, you're talking hundreds of millions of dollars. Like, this is super rich type stuff we're talking about here. In 2005, Kushner was sentenced to 2 years in prison after pleading guilty to 16 federal counts of filing false tax returns, 1 count of retaliating against a cooperating witness, and 1 count of making false statements to the Federal Election Commission. Jen, do you think you could have produced such an outstanding result for a high-priced client?
Oh my goodness. No, I mean, it's just, but again, this is just so par for the course. Like, I don't know. None of this seems remotely.
None of this seems to be like, is this even worse than Hunter Biden? I mean, it seems to be sort of like.
Well, here's the thing. It's probably on equal footing, but one's domestic and one's international. That's basically the difference. But here's a nice little wrinkle in the story. Former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, who served as the lead prosecutor in the federal case against Charles Kushner, alleged the real estate mogul had assisted in filing false tax returns, claiming in over $1 million in charitable donations as office expenses, causing between $200,000 to $325,000 in losses to the IRS. Well, you can't fuck with the IRS. That's not allowed. And of course, Christie will always have an axe to grind with Trump, so it's not surprising that that would come out. So he is a white-collar criminal, and he is now being given a very prestigious role. Being an ambassador to any foreign nation may be one of the sweetest government jobs you could possibly have. It is as token, with all due respect, as any job you could possibly be given. Show up at the cocktail parties.
How do I get that job?
Yeah, talk about
That's another good job.
Talk about how great the French cuisine is and their art and high society, and talk about how America needs to be more like France. Talk about a hard job.
Well, we need yellow vests in the streets, if that's what you're talking about. I do think we should be more like France in that way.
The only difference is that Trump just doesn't care. And I think that that's what's really appealing to a lot of people, is that everyone's breaking the law, but Trump is like, we're totally doing it, but I'm not going to lie to you about it. And I think people appreciate that, because you see Biden, Obama, Hillary, we could go on, Wasserman Schultz, the list goes on and on. They all claim higher ground, and they are just as disgusting, if not worse than they are. And to me, they are more disgusting because they're pretending to be something that they're not. Trump knows that pardoning, who was the guy that was the governor of Chicago, or the governor of Illinois? Pete, I'm forgetting his name.
Oh, I know who you're talking about.
It's not Blagojevich, because I'm thinking of, it's like a similar name. It's
like Bogdanovich or something.
Yeah.
I know who you're talking about.
And there was no reason for him to pardon him. None whatsoever. He was caught red-handed selling a Senate seat after Obama won the presidency.
Right.
And he got sent to prison. And Trump said, no, we're totally going to pardon him. For what reason?
You don't need a reason. That's the beauty of the pardon.
That's the beauty of being in the club. And, Carlin would say it's a big club and you ain't in it. I've always said it's a small club and you're just not invited. Like, understand that if you're part of it, I will always maintain that the biggest reason they went after Trump as hard as they did is because he will accidentally tell the truth more often than not.
Yes, he exposes them.
They can't afford that. They can't afford it. Can't afford it. It's too risky.
Well, I think the cat's out of the bag now. I think there's a lot of truth that are coming out that they don't really like, and so we'll. I mean, like that to me, that's kind of the beauty of the Trump administration is that he's just much more honest about it. And I think one of the if you're talking about a Democrat who was kind of honest and got kind of paid the price for it a little bit is Eric Adams, because I think he was appointing a ton of people in his family to positions in the New York City government. And he was he had to pay a little bit of the price for it. I think he might survive. I think it's what it sounds like. I don't know for sure, but I spoke to Larry Sharp, who is the libertarian gubernatorial candidate. And he was telling me, Eric Adams, he was just really honest. He's like, people do this all the time. I'm going to appoint my sister to this position. Everybody does it. I'm going to do it. And then people in the media apparently was like, okay, fine. And so it's, I like to get to a point where we can just be honest. Then we can really debate the real issue, right? If you're talking about, let's say you talk about Israel, right? If we can't agree that this is a genocide, I don't really know how we can have a conversation. If we just admit, we got to do the genocide. This is a worthy genocide to be doing for X, Y, and Z reason. Then we can actually then debate it versus like, no, this is like, the right thing to do because Hamas is a terrorist organization and then they're doing this and that. Then we can't really be honest about what's actually happening over there. And you're talking about, the UN workers or these World Kitchen workers. They're like, oh no, those guys are also Hamas too, by the way. Then we're not really like having an honest conversation. Just be like, okay, we got to explain to me, sell the genocide to me, and maybe I'll go along with it. I don't know, but it's definitely not if, Israel is not the state that you tell us it is. It is not the only democracy in the Middle East. I'm sorry to go off on this kind of thing, but it is not because it is an apartheid state. There's literally laws there that are akin to apartheid. There's roads that some people can go on, some people can't go on, other people can't go on. So I don't know what you guys are doing. I think slowly, I think people are kind of unlearning, and that's a little bit of my content is geared towards that. It's kind of just unlearning, like, hey, we don't know exactly what the real truth is, but it's certainly not what you're telling us. Like we don't know who killed Kennedy, but it's certainly not the one bullet that went around in a circle or whatever.
The magic bullet.
Yeah, it's certainly not that. So, so maybe this could be good for America. I think just to kind of try to at least get things out in the open, to be honest about things, and maybe we'll see where that gets us. I don't know.
I think the best place to wind down the conversation, of course, is to address the biggest issue that we can see coming down the pike with the Trump administration. And that is whether you want to call it an acceleration with the Israel lobby. They certainly are going full bore into this, which I always maintained was going to end up having the opposite intended effect. Now, all of a sudden, every pretentious liberal in society is potentially, you never know, but you think that they're more apt to care about what's going on with the Palestinian children right now. In fact, Colin, if you can grab the headline, filmmaker Michael Moore actually came out today and made a statement pertaining to the Senate and how they are facilitating the genocide. It's like, now that Trump is in power again, now they can stop pretending about how great Kamala is or whether Joe Biden was doing the right thing. Of course, he wasn't. Now we are faced with the real prospect of how much worse can this possibly get? I don't think it can, but who's to say that our country isn't stupid enough to take a very big risk, or at least Trump isn't willing to take a very big risk, and he's doing it all for Miriam Adelson, who basically got him elected. Here's your check for $100 million. Now, as soon as you get in there, you're going to do exactly what I say. And essentially every single solitary appointment has some degree of attachment to the state of Israel.
He has basically assembled the Zionist Avengers. His cabinet is like the Zionist Avengers. That's what it looks like to me. I don't think he's. I mean, even the ones that are not as bad, they're still Zionists.
All of them. Yeah, I mean,
they're all
$100 million is not a free check. I mean, you have to do these things. But I would. So this is the part where I would say I think there is a break in the right now.
I hope so.
With the people, with the Israel thing.
I think the libertarian movement in the GOP is very real. I think it has a lot of teeth. I think leaders like Dave Smith have a tremendous amount of influence, especially over people like Joe Rogan. And I do think that Trump's rhetoric of this war is ridiculous, we have to stop it, he can say what he wants. But the fact is, people in the populist right, unlike the left, are actually willing to fight. Like, they're willing to fight. They are not going to take this.
We just have to hope that the people on the right that those are the people that somebody ends up listening to. But I mean, his appointments are not inspiring.
No. And that's also why,
regarding Israel.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, I do think that protesting matters. It still has an effect because it keeps things fresh in people's minds. But very few people are truly willing to go where they need to go. And we just want to play this quick clip of somebody I think that if there is a celebrity, a known celebrity.
Yeah, we always have to give props to Susan.
Yeah. If there's one celebrity, a true celebrity who does put her money where her mouth is, it is Susan Sarandon.
She was also a donor to my campaign.
Pressuring, hopefully, all those that are contributing to the ongoing genocide in Gaza and Lebanon and everywhere else where there's violence against the will of the majority of people. And I'm happy to see so many have turned out. And I think that's all we can do now is keep pressure on, make it clear that this is not something that we want to pay for any longer.
What do you think about the ICC ruling and how the U.S., they're not accepting it?
Well, I don't think international law can be inconsistent. And one thing that this situation has brought to light is just how little respect the United States has for international law, the UN and the criminal court, and there's no explanation why Israel should be given a special free ride in terms of war crimes. And I'm ashamed that my country has given white phosphorus bombs and 2,000-pound bombs in both Ukraine and in Palestine, because these are all things that have been outlawed by the Geneva Conventions, and starvation also. So, I think that's a really sad thing to learn. And the other thing that has been exposed is just how corrupt our information is, our papers, our journalists, whether it's subtly forming a narrative that is passive in terms of Israel and aggressive in terms of Hamas, the words that are used, and the little history that they want exposed, the circumstances. So I hope that has awakened a lot of people who haven't even thought about Palestine before this. I think that could be a real breakthrough, and I'm happy about that.
She's so sweet. Can I also say that she's 78 years old and she looks amazing? Like, just a fan. Just saying.
Wow, I didn't know she was 78.
She's
impressive.
78 years old.
Yeah. Hey, Donald Trump's 78 years old.
I don't see him marching for Palestine wearing a keffiyeh. So,
I just want people to stop dying.
Yeah. Then stop appointing psychopathic Zio-Nazis to your cabinet.
No, listen, I have to appoint them because they pay very well. They're good people. They totally have. They've helped me. And I'm going to annex the West Bank, which is specifically what Ms. Adelson asked me to do. It will honor her late husband. It's a smart move. It's a great move. Smartest move I've ever made. Right after, of course, moving the embassy from.
See, and there was the problem from the beginning. The writing was always on the wall with him. So.
But you know what? It's like anything. It's like the Bush tax cuts and Obama makes them permanent. It's the Trump tax cuts, Biden makes them permanent. It's the same thing. And the same cycle repeats itself. You moved the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, and then Biden had the opportunity to move it back. He didn't do it. It's all the same bullshit. Yes, there are some ancillary niche, type of issues that we can have, on debating whether or not there's real substantial differences between the two parties. But the truth is there really isn't. This is a corporate oligarchy in plain sight, and to pretend otherwise is to just be lying to yourself at this point. And this genocide, I hope, is going to continue to expose the internal rot of this system. Now, granted, I've seen enough spoiled liberals, as I'm sure you have, that said, well, now we don't care what happens to the Gaza children. You asked for it, you're going to get it. It's like, okay, well, if that's your attitude about genocide, then you were never going to help anyway, even if Kamala won. So at least we know for sure that there was no mistaking our decision not to support her. But now,
yes, they wish a spiteful genocide on us for not supporting Kamala Harris.
But that's the scary part. There will be a contingent of people that will speak up for the Palestinian people now if they think there's a political upsmanship against Trump that they can use to their advantage.
And we'll see. I mean, we'll see who these people are, because I just looked up. I mean, I'm working on a piece right now, just looking at the TikTok ban that's about to go through in about a month. We'll see what happens with that. But there's just so much evidence that the Israel lobby was behind a lot of that to get across the finish line. And one of the statistics that I came up is, of the 500 plus members in Congress, only 30 did not receive any money from the Israel lobby in the last election cycle, which means, how are they going to speak out? Who's going to, you have a couple people maybe, who's going to do it? Who's going to defy the Israel lobby?
Thomas Massey's the only one, aside from Rashida Tlaib, that has really, truly done it. So you've got one in each party. That's pretty sad. I mean, even Ilhan Omar plays things way too close to the chest for my liking. I don't think she's a sellout the way AOC is, but
no,
it's still, at some point you just got to say, fuck it. I mean, when everybody's drowning, you're going to drown too. You're not going to avoid it. You cannot find higher ground. We will eventually all go beneath the surface, and we'll all die unless somebody is willing to really just make that mark. That's why I think it's just so telling right now and so very sad. And I hate to end the conversation on a sad note, but Bernie even writing that email the other day and even toying with the idea that maybe it's time for another path. Maybe it's time for a third party. No, Bernie, it was time for that when they screwed you in 2016.
That was the time. That was the time, and that moment has passed.
Yeah. And so now what do we do? As we conclude this conversation, James, what is the future of populist left politics? Because it doesn't seem like it has much of one right now.
Well, so I think so. I've been diving into this idea, or this book that a friend of mine recently wrote about mutual aid. And I think that's really the path forward, is getting back. I mean, everybody should agree with this. It's getting back to the community level, and making sure that you have a strong community of people around you, and starting from the ground up and trying to, as best you can, really, to be honest, to insulate yourself from these kinds of things that are happening that are awful, right? You have to just be there for each other. I think we have to learn how to be nice to one another in person versus doing it online, which people do all the time. They're just like, oh, we need to speak up. The same, you were making that comment about the Palestinians and how people are like, okay, see, now they're going to really feel that genocide. People say the same thing also about, migrant workers or people, immigrants, and these days, like, oh, you're a Latino and you voted for Trump. Well, you're really going to get it now. But I think we have to start being nice to each other in person and helping each other out, when somebody needs to change their time. I mean, I'm being a little bit like cliche here, but like if somebody has a flat tire on the road, like we need to get back to that. And mutual aid, I think, is a common ground that I think both the left and the right can really decide on. Is like everybody wants community. And I think that's hopefully where we can go to decentralize and to get back to people around where you live and make sure you treat those people really well.
I agree. And I think that's the biggest concern for parties, because as soon as you start having like small sustainable communities that are working together, there's no need for parties, because people won't have, it's sort of, you won't be able to keep people in their tribal corners when they're actually working together in person, because we agree on way more than we don't. Every single time across, with very few exceptions, red and blue. We agree on things. It's just a matter of how it's presented to us. And so I agree. I support small, sustainable worker co-op, community garden. Yeah. But I want to live in the woods in a hobbit house. So, there's that.
Well, I don't.
Like no,
but I think that we have a lot of common ground. I want to thank you again personally for helping Jen. I remember the video that you did with her did extremely well.
Yeah, people loved you, Jen, on Breaking Points. I think you were one of those people that we're really all pulling forward to hopefully, take out, Debbie, because I think everybody hates. I don't know how she wins. I don't know. You could tell me better. Like why do people still vote for her? I don't know.
They don't in that it's not, it's hard to explain. It's weird.
I can tell you
people don't vote. And that's really what it comes down to in a primary, especially. Like our voter turnout is exceptionally low. And the old faithful people come out. But yeah, Peter can probably explain better. Why do these people keep voting for Debbie Wasserman?
So the union bosses are still protecting her.
There's that.
That is a known thing. We have a friend.
We tried with them again.
Yeah, we have a friend who's very high up in labor and basically said off the record that the union bosses just love her. And it's like, yeah, the union bosses love her. If the union bosses love her, then that's a bad sign, because I guarantee you the union rank and file doesn't.
No, yeah, they don't.
Do not go against their union. We were trying to get the firefighters. I had engaged them on 3 different levels, including one of the former heads of the labor of the union that wanted Jen to be endorsed. But they eventually, Debbie will put the gun to your head.
Well, here's the thing. She actually does threaten people. She blackmails people. She bullies people. And, that's how she operates down here. This is her little fiefdom. And
something as simple as the Juneteenth parade in the most black part of our congressional district. And she actually went to one of the leaders of the community and said, you ever allow Perelman to show up at one of my events again, I'll take your 501c3 away. And that's how fast she operates. She doesn't hesitate. She's like,
and people get bullied. Well, 100%. Because it's threatening, and she definitely bullies people. Plus, I know she blackmails. She does some really seedy shit. So when you do that, there's a lot more people that are scared of her than like her.
Yeah, and then ultimately, you remember that when you were the head, that people still forget, she's not who she once was, but she ran the party for 6 years. She's the longest tenured DNC chair that ever existed, and she would have went on for many more years if not for what happened in 2016. Ultimately, Jen, please don't put comments like that up. It's not necessary.
He's a regular. I think he's being sarcastic. That's why it's so freaking funny. No, he's one of our regular conservatives.
And so I think ultimately, is it a question of could she lose? Yeah, I mean, she could.
It'll be to a Republican.
Most likely. The problem that we have
won't be in a primary
is that the youth are not interested in the Democratic Party down here. That's part of the problem. It's these bougie libs that are the young types that are not interested in anything other than their own careers. And so trying to get people out there to be involved is very hard.
Yeah.
And then the western part of the district, which is where, she lives in the town of Weston, and then there's Pembroke Pines. There's a handful of these towns where Miramar, a significant portion of the consistent Democratic primary voter demographic live in gated communities.
Can't get in.
So the only way you're ever going to get to them is through a lot of money spent on TV ads and a lot of money spent on mailers. And that, for a campaign that had a few $100,000 versus a campaign that needed a few $1 million, is essentially where the difference lies. That is one of the harder truths about politics. Every district is different, but Debbie is protected because she represents a very privileged district. And that's part of it. And that's not to say that all of the district is privileged.
No, and by the way, the Republican that ran against her got within 8 points of her, which is the closest that anyone's come.
Yeah. I mean, she, more than anybody else, James, I would say, is the reason why, probably since Obama's first win, when it was a lean blue state and he won by 3 points, it's now a blood red state. And she has a lot to do with that, especially over the last few election cycles. And so until that, I mean, you remember, Jen, what she did to that protester at the event in Orlando, how she was cheering on the person getting kicked out because she had the Palestinian flag. It's just so obvious that.
Yeah. Well, she was one of the how many, 13 that just supported that.
One of 15 Democrats, who supported the pro-Israel censorship bill. Not even Gottheimer or Richie Torres supported it. They're like, okay, this is a bridge too far. But for her, it's not. There is no line that she won't cross. And she's one of the most prolific insider traders in all of Congress, both parties included. So to me, it's really... Until
we don't know why people vote for her.
Yeah, until she goes, until people wake up to that reality, she's the reason why the party is completely dead in this state. And you know what? When you think about future presidential elections, the idea that you think that you could just toss away a 30 electoral vote state, like, we can't even try. The Republicans they actually try to win votes in California. Like, that's impressive. And you saw how close they got in New York. It's like the Democrats they literally have nothing to offer in the state of Florida, and it won't happen until after Debbie's out. When she goes, there might be some semblance of an opportunity to change course. But as of right now, it's a dead issue, and it's really unfortunate. But the truth should be told. And every time we get a chance to share with people the reality of why Wasserman Schultz maintains her power, I think more and more people need to realize that on the surface, it's confusing, but once you dig underneath the hood of the car, it's pretty sick. And you feel on the one hand, you realize that there's a lot, there's so much corruption out there, but at the same time, there's a lot of people who are just looking out for themselves in whatever capacity they can. The rest of the people be damned. That's how I see it.
Well, I appreciate you guys for being boots on the ground, because I just yap. You guys are actually doing real. You guys are trying to do it. So I appreciate you guys continue going at it. I hope you continue. I hope you do it again. Maybe, I don't know if it's through the Democratic Party. It's an independent. I don't know. But I feel like, people always tell me it's like, or ask me if I'm black-pilled or whatever. But I'm like, I'm just going to keep trying. I'm going to keep putting out information and, hope for the best. Because if I don't, then I'll just go back to my consulting job. Because I don't know if you guys know this, because I came from, corporate consulting. I was an MBA guy. Worked in management consulting for 4.5 years, saw how the sausage is made there, got sort of fed up with that. And I said, I can't do this. And that's when I sort of pivoted to what I'm doing now.
Wait, did you say that you were with the NBA, the National Basketball Association?
That's a funny joke. No, I was MBA. I graduated from NYU.
Okay.
Business degree. No, I wish I'm not Jeremy Lin, but
okay. Fair enough.
But I can't. Yeah,
what he's saying is he worked for the dark side, and is no longer with the dark side. Has joined the Rebel Alliance, and we appreciate that.
We appreciate you being here, my friend. Thank you for all that you do, guys.
Thanks,
James' information is in the links below. Check them out. Thank you so much, brother. Happy holidays.
Appreciate it. Thank you for having me on.
Anytime. That was a great conversation.
Love journalist people that actually do the research and know what they're talking about.
Yeah,
it's fascinating when that happens.
And I think that anytime you can talk to a journalist that is curious about specific topics, that's the thing. When people want to know, why do certain things happen in politics, there's so many layers to it. We've talked with one of our good friends who's from the streets and was just completely flabbergasted by what actually goes on during political campaigns.
Yeah.
Just how devastating things are with people that they think that they can trust, that are looking out for their community. In reality, they're just looking out for their bottom line.
It's just such a grift. It's just such a friggin' grift. And I think, yes, he was lovely. He was lovely. And I think that is worse on the Democratic side than on the Republican side. I do.
I think the bigger difference between the two sides is that the political right, especially the populist right, the libertarian right, they just don't tolerate that shit. They actually call things out. They actually hold their people to account. They actually get people to put money where their mouth is. Even somebody like Chris Eddy. Think about how many major billboards he had up in the district that we so desperately wish we had the capital to do so. And then the other problem is that you end up getting some people who want to support you, but they only want to support you on their terms. They're not willing to give you the benefit of the doubt that maybe you know what's best for this circumstance. A person could be in a completely different part of the country and then tell you, no, I know what's good for you.
Well, that's everywhere in political campaigning. That's like rampant. Everybody knows what's best. Everybody knows your district. Everybody knows what, like, it's, yeah.
I really think that there is a lot of work to be done, but that's where these conversations come in. And I think they have a lot of validity. They help us get our message out there, which is half the battle. Now, what we do going forward, it's still kind of up in the air. What is the best course of action? New York.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much. If you have any requests, I can't dance on attack, but I could try. Just let me know. I'm a $20 whore. I'm cheap. I'll do as you ask for the most part. I'll see how far I'm willing to go.
Me, not so much.
No. Jen always relies on me to basically put myself out there.
You're willing to do that nonsense. I'm not willing to do that.
Hey, that's how we get the big bucks. That's a big start. Remember, if you are so inclined, go to patreon.com/generational change. For as little as $5 a month, you can become a supporter of our small but mighty channel. It does seem like our channel is picking up some steam.
A little bit. And guys, if you haven't hit the like button and you're not subscribed, please do that too. That's helpful. And it's free.
Yeah. Just think that doesn't cost anything. And then, of course, when our live stream finishes, you can go in and leave a comment. That also helps boost the algorithm. Make sure you're checking out our clips. There's a lot of different ways that you can contribute, even if you're not able to donate. That is something that I think a lot of people misunderstand. This idea that I can't contribute in other ways. No, you definitely can. There are ways to make a difference.
Honestly, people subscribing and liking is very helpful, and sharing is also good.
Yeah.
Are we talking about Syria? Are we not talking about Syria? Like, what is your thing? I see some of the things you have up there, but there are things that I was like, I don't really want to do that.
Well, this is a great way to close the show. So let's talk about Syria, Jen.
What about Syria? Does anybody know what's going on in Syria? Is everybody aware of what's going on in Syria?
I am not very well versed. That's why I defer to you, because
this is going to be just the general sort of interpretation of events, and we will get more details on this with expert people. We are going to have Matthew Ho on next week, and he is definitely infinitely more experted at this topic. But essentially,
I do bet you that our lovely guest on Thursday night, Margaret Kimberly, our friend of the show, will be making her.
Oh, she'll also have plenty to say about Syria also.
100%.
There's people that are way more learned than me. But the gist of what's happening in Syria is our Groundhog Day regime change 101. So essentially, we are currently right now, and by we, I mean American Empire. Okay, you could put it on. It's technically, I think it's through Turkey, but it's empire. We are arming and supporting the rebels. Now, normally that would sound good because normally I would be supporting rebels. Rebel sounds good. However, in Syria, hello to the Netherlands. In Syria, the rebels that we are funding are, I forget if it's Al-Qaeda or ISIS. It is a terrorist group.
Al-Qaeda.
It is Al-Qaeda. Okay, so I just know it's a terrorist group that we have sought to eradicate, and now we are providing them with the means to revolt in Syria. And why? Why do we want to have? What do you think it is?
It's just so interesting how everything comes full circle after all these years. Why did we have to go over there, Jen? Why did we have to go to Afghanistan and Iraq?
The thing about what's going on in Syria, and again, this is something we'd have to do a real deep dive into, but just to give people a general idea of what's going on right now, is they're fighting over, and when I say they, I mean empires, are fighting over where the location of this oil line, this pipeline, is going to go. And it's going to basically go in one of two ways. Yes, that is, I know, I'm aware of that. Unfortunately, I'm so much more focused on Western Asia than Eastern Asia and or Mid Asia, and I'm just like, but can I finish talking about Syria without you?
Please.
You do this, you get me so distracted.
Yeah.
So for people just to understand, ultimately at the end of the day, this is over where the location of a pipeline is going to go. That's what this is about. I don't care what they say it's about. This is where it's about. So this pipeline in question will either ultimately end up in, I believe it's Syria or Turkey. Like, and so obviously if it ends up in a place like Syria, then that gives people and countries like Iran and Russia control over something that we should, of course, have total control over. Whereas if Turkey has it, meaning American empire, then that would be within our control. So we are fighting in Syria. We are trying to unlodge again in a place where we were told to leave. And yet I don't understand why we're still there. And as far as I'm concerned, if the Syrians wanted to start bombing American locations in their country, I wouldn't even have a problem with this. I think that basically we're doing the same thing in Syria that we do all over the place. It's a regime. We're trying to enact a regime change war to get control so we can have the pipeline. That's what this is about. And again, we'll have to do we'll have to do a much deeper dive. I do not understand all the details as far as the factions, and I am by no means an Assad apologist or whatever.
Yes, you are.
No, I'm not. But I do know.
And Jen, if you are an Assad apologist, who gives a fuck?
Yeah, well, I'm not an anybody apologist, but what I do know is Syria is a sovereign nation that we are illegally in, have been asked repeatedly to leave by said sovereign nation, and we refuse to do so. So that is something in and of itself that has been infuriating to me for years. Just that. So the fact that we are part of, and of course, again, it's going to look like it's Turkey, but it's us. And so, yeah, we're arming essentially a terrorist faction to win over pipeline of the oil. That's what's happening.
Well, just as I said at the beginning of the live stream, I say it now as we come full circle. It's the same thing about Ukraine. It's the same thing about Syria. It's the same thing about Iraq. The Middle East, despite the fact that it is a desert, is a very exceedingly rich natural resource region.
That's why they never allowed it to become what it was always meant to be, which would have been Greater Syria. And had it been that, it would basically be a chunk of Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, and Palestine would be Greater Syria. And that whole region would actually have control of its own resources. And the British and the French couldn't possibly allow that. So they had to carve it up into little kingdoms and put their little kingdom heads, their little tools in charge of places like Saudi Arabia and Jordan and this stuff. So if they had allowed Greater Syria to be Greater Syria, we wouldn't own energy like we do. Like it would be an entirely different universe. And so we have to keep all of those separate. But at the end of the day, Lebanese, Syrians, Iraqis, Jordanians, that is a group of people. That is a group of people, and we can make them all separate. Yeah.
Jay's right.
Yeah.
And ultimately, any one country, I always refer it back to Gaddafi. The worst thing, I mean, listen, there were a lot of terrible things that Obama did during his presidency. And I don't even necessarily put it as his feet as much as I put it at Hillary Clinton's. But what they did to Libya is one of the biggest war crimes this world has ever seen. No one is here to say that Gaddafi was a great guy, but there is no question that he loved it. You know, it's kind of like what James was saying earlier. I can accept if my leader is corrupt, if he's taking care of his people.
I've said that before too.
That's what Gaddafi was doing. He was corrupt, but he was taking care of his people, and he was trying to get his country off of the petrodollar and onto their own gold standard. And
can't have that.
Not acceptable.
No. Well, this is why we've been constantly trying to coup Venezuela back to Chavez. Like, I mean, we cannot allow all of the pariah countries to us are simply countries that don't want to trade on the US dollar. How dare some other countries want to trade in their own currency? However, what I will say about what's going on in Syria, it is definitely going to impact whether or not Russia will ever allow Turkey into BRICS. I think what Turkey's participation in Syria right now could be what prevents it from being part of BRICS, which definitely also benefits the United States. So us like engaging in some sort of military situation where us and Turkey are, buddy, that's just another, it's sort of like camaraderie building, if you will. It's team building. It's a team building exercise.
Well, that's also the issue here. As
Wait,
Richard
it sounded so what did that say before? That it sounded complicated? This is one instance where it really sounds complicated.
Well, Donald James.
Yeah, there are a lot of different plots. But I will say there's a lot of different factions. But at the end of the day, it comes down to American empire versus not American empire. And control.
So according to Colanello, Turkey's in NATO, hence they can't be in BRICS.
Yes, they can. No, that's not true, because I believe Egypt. Isn't Egypt in NATO? Is Egypt in NATO? No, Egypt's not in NATO. Well, I don't know that's I don't know if there's another NATO country in BRICS, but I don't know that they can't be.
Well, here's where
that's what I'm saying.
Here's where we're going to find out what the future is going to look like very, very quickly, and just how committed our saber rattling under Trump is really going to look like, because he's wasting no time, Jen. The idea that the BRICS countries are trying to move away from the dollar while we stand by and watch is over. We require commitment from these countries that they will neither create a new BRICS currency nor back any currency to replace the mighty US dollar, or they will face 100% tariffs and should expect to say goodbye to selling into the wonderful US economy. They can go find another sucker. There is no chance that the BRICS will replace the US dollar in international trade, and any country that tries should wave goodbye to America.
Do you he is so fucking ignorant. Like the fact that this is our president-elect and this is something he's putting out. First of all, BRICS is not developing a uniform currency. That's not what they're doing. They don't have a currency. They're not seeking to do a currency. So the fact that he puts that out where he clearly has no concept of what BRICS is. But yes, ultimately, these are countries that want to trade amongst themselves
without having the petrodollar as the go-between.
Well, right. They want to trade in their own currencies.
Correct.
And the fact that we somehow
think that we have
the absolute
capacity to say, no, you're going to trade through us. Like, who in the fuck are you?
It's such good. And you get like Lindsey Graham talking about putting sanctions on our allies for, agreeing to arrest Netanyahu according to international law. Like these two people that you want to just keep baiting every country in the world into, by all means. But no, BRICS is not creating a uniform currency. That's not something that they've talked about. BRICS is also not anti-American. It's not anti-American and it's not anti-West. The fact that we perceive anything that isn't about us to be against us, that's our psychosis. That's a psychosis.
Yeah, it's part of the psychosis, but it's also showing the fragility of our current system and where we currently stand.
Clearly, we're insecure. That comes off as extremely insecure.
And somebody put him up to that. There's somebody in his circle who
pick a tool. It could be any of his tools.
Yeah. Well, who is the most likely culprit? Who's the most likely person to get in his ear and say, this BRICS thing is going to be really bad for us if we don't address it sooner rather than later, Mr.
Any
Trump.
one of his oligarchs?
Yeah.
Pick an oligarch? I don't know.
You know what? I could see Elon making a statement like that.
I don't know with him because now he's somebody that I look at as his financial interests are so global that I don't know, there's no way to know what would or wouldn't suit him, because what's necessarily best for our economy, he's invested in every economy.
Yes.
So I don't know that something like BRICS is something that Elon, I don't see how that would necessarily affect him.
Well, as Chris Garrett says, and this is very true, how many wars have been started over threats of moving off the petrodollar? Well, when one country does it, they just take them to war. When a dozen countries do it, it's not as easy, especially.
No, and they let them go it's so absurd. It's so hyperbolic. He just comes off like such a buffoon.
He does. And ultimately, Trump's greatest asset is also his greatest weakness, which is his hubris. Trump has the hubris to actually buck American orthodoxy. He also has the hubris to put it on full display that American exceptionalism will never be stopped.
See, and if this is true, which is something that, or at least has some interest there, which is what I would believe. I would tend to believe that Musk is extremely globally diversified.
Yeah.
And as a result, he wins with BRICS, he wins without BRICS. That's what I would think. So yeah. I don't see how that, yeah. He wins both with heads you win, tails he loses.
At that level of wealth, that is correct. That's why you can spend $44 billion on a social media platform and not make money on it either.
But BRICS is, I mean, yes, it's technically a threat, I suppose, to, U.S. hegemony, which personally pleases me. Like, I want that to happen. So I don't care. I don't know how that would happen. I don't know.
They
have too much money at stake. And here's the problem is that we don't do anything else. We don't make anything else. Our entire existence and industry is based on weapons and war. So when you talk about cutting the military budget, what you're really saying is we're going to reduce the amount of money that we give to Lockheed and Raytheon and all of those places. And that is not something that's going to happen.
The other thing you have to remember about Trump's statement, which I think is completely egregious on his part, granted he's not the boss yet. Who are really our allies at this point, Jen? I mean, outside of maybe the UK and really England for the most part, and Israel, it's like we have completely isolated ourselves from the world. And it's not to say that there aren't countries who'd be like, well, we like America, but we're not getting involved in this.
I think Uruguay. There's one of those countries down there.
No, it's not Uruguay. It's called You Are Gay. That's the name of the country. I can say that because that's.
But no, we are the world pariahs, and to me, it's just symbolic. We are going down, and personally, I think it needs to happen. So it doesn't bother me.
With statements like that from Trump, he will hasten the demise.
Like the rest of the world sees that and just thinks, "What a bully buffoon." I mean, nobody looks at that and thinks that sounds like an intelligent person, because, again, he obviously has no idea what BRICS even is.
Obviously not.
I bet you he can't even name the named countries in BRICS.
Well, let's see. There's Bolivia. There's Rwanda. There's Iceland. There's Canada. There's Sudan. Okay, there it is. I named your BRICS.
There's your BRICS countries.
How could they possibly stand up to the almighty U.S. empire? You tell me. How could those five totally?
Well, I think that ultimately that will be the failure of American empire. The ultimate failure of American empire will come down to being economically isolated and basically disemboweled by the rest of the world. And it needs to happen. This is the thing. We're Icarus. We're Icarus.
Yeah. No, we are flying very close to the sun. There's no question.
I have a Chevy.
Yeah. And I will say this, Donald, if there is a completely, I would say, conquered, completely colonized part of the world, it's Southeast Asia, and the Philippines are right at the top. What we have done to that country, especially in terms of agriculture, apparel, clothing, what we do in that nation is beyond disgusting.
Is there a country we haven't screwed with?
Switzerland. Past that, I can't really say. And the only reason
and I'm not talking about Europe. That doesn't count. I'm not even talking about Europe because we don't. We don't go after countries in Europe. We oppress the country and subjugate the countries in the global South and in those. We don't. I'm talking about countries.
You know what I think ended up happening, because one thing that people forget about Libya and why Obama and Hillary's legacy. We came, we saw, he died. Of course, the Republicans that went after.
And by the way, that is psychopathic.
Oh, absolutely. But
that's a crazy person thing to say.
Yeah. And to think that it was a joke, and she did it off camera thinking that no one would see it. To think that in her privacy that she's that much of a psychopath. that she's.
Well, who do you think she's surrounded with? She's surrounded by fellow psychopaths. So they're all in the same. They're all on the same page.
Yeah. What was the thing that the GOP was obsessed over? They kept talking about it forever. The 4 soldiers that died.
Oh, Benghazi.
Benghazi. So you're talking about Benghazi nonstop. Benghazi this, Benghazi that.
Right.
And at the end of the day, you didn't talk about the main issue behind Benghazi. And that is, we murdered a leader of a nation because he didn't want to play ball with us. And you turned what was the most successful nation in the entire continent of Africa into one of the most dangerous, piss poor, out of control nations in the world.
We've done that in a lot of places, actually. We've done that in a lot of places. We're a large part of why Central America is a mess.
But why didn't the GOP talk about Gaddafi? Why did they stick to Benghazi the entire time? Because once you cross that Rubicon on empire, there is no going back. Because people can't look at the system the same again after you've gone into that place. You will never get people back. That is why when people say, well, 70 million people voted for Kamala and this and that, it's like, you don't understand. Once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. They will continue to fight to prevent us from having those options to make that change. But it's inevitable now. Now the change is set in motion.
Jimmy Zimzam's asking us to have somebody come on and talk about the relationship between Trump and, is that Sheinbaum, the new president in Mexico. Yeah. I still can't get over the fact that, and I know this is so ridiculous because of course I know there's Jews in Mexico, but the idea that the Mexican president's name is a Jewish name is just so interesting to me.
Well, Jimmy, if you have any recommendations, remember you can send us an email and we will be more than happy to reach out and have, again, that's what we do. We're all about transforming politics into service.
And it is, and my understanding is that it's definite that she's a Zionist.
She could be. Listen, the Jewish state is destroying itself every day, whether it comes from somebody as, psychopathic as Rabbi Shmuley.
Wait, is this true? She's a pro-Palestinian? I don't know if they're talking about the same person.
I don't know if I would call her pro-Palestinian, but she's definitely anti-genocide.
Okay. Well, then that's promising. Okay. Yeah. So then that's promising. Okay, good. So I like to hear that. And not that I think Mexico is some heavy influencer in the Palestine conflict, but.
No. But you know what? Mexico has education and it has healthcare. 2 things we don't have.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things.
Yeah. I like Mexico.
I would like to go to Baja California.
I like Mexico and I like Mexicans.
And I like where I'm living now because the Mexicans do live in this area and their food is freaking fantastic.
Adam, if there's one thing we do not like here, it's Rabbi Shmuley.
And you know who's just as bad as Rabbi Shmuley, if not worse? Mr. Mike I Heart Huckabee.
He's horrible.
That's the big difference.
He's so horrible.
And that's the big difference between the Jewish Zionist and the evangelical Zionist. The evangelical Zionist is hoping and praying for the end in their lifetime. Like they want to see the rapture.
Oh, yes. They want to facilitate that shit.
Even though there's 100 trillion stars in the entire universe. Just a thought. But we're very special here, Jen. I hope you understand that.
Well, we are. We're very special.
Thursday night, make sure you're here, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 8 p.m. Central Standard Time. We will be speaking with friend of the show and a person who pulls no punches on the bullshit that is American empire. That, of course, is Margaret Kimberly of the Black Agenda Report. So we will be speaking with her. Following Thursday, we'll be speaking with our friend Matthew Ho. We are going to figure out who our next Monday night guest is. But in the meantime, we certainly hope that you all are enjoying our channel. As we've pointed out before, we are steadily growing. Me Want Tacos, you finally showed up. Happy to have you here. Jill Stein for 31K write-in votes in Illinois. Not bad. State
Very
record.
good.
Thank you, Emoji. I appreciate that knowledge. Schultze, I'm not going to post your comment, but you are correct. And that for itself, I think, really goes a long way.
Yeah.
So and
you know what? For all I know, Mike Huckabee is a really nice guy.
I've never heard a bad thing about him as a person.
I'm sure he is. He's a nice Christian man. That's just fucking great.
However, remember he won the Iowa caucuses in 2008.
However, his level of ignorance about facts versus religion is very problematic. I do not like people that base geopolitics on religion, and I'm with you. And so that is ultimately the problem with Mike Huckabee. He might be nice, and maybe he's great. He could be a pastor. He could whatever, lead your own flock, do your own thing. But I don't like people discussing geopolitics from a Bible perspective. That is not going to serve us, and that is a big problem with Mike Huckabee. He refuses to mention, he doesn't say Palestine. He doesn't say Palestinians.
That's that they don't exist.
Well, there's that. And he also refers to call the West Bank the West Bank. He calls it Judea and Samaria, which is so off the wall radical, and even from a Jewish perspective, like Jews, just no.
Jews for Jesus, Jen.
Well, I mean, yeah. No, I'm not a fan, but again, I don't like my geopolitics based on the Bible. It's just me.
On that note, we appreciate you all being here. We hope you all had a great Thanksgiving. We hope you all have had a great start to the holiday season. Jen, I may be afar, but we're still working. And
so are we going to do that interview on Thursday? Is that what you were sending me on that show before our show? Is that what you were sending me the email for?
Willie?
No, I'm going on with Willie.
That's what I'm saying.
No, that's not what I'm talking about. There was that other thing that you sent me.
Oh, right. No, it can't be this Thursday because I have an event I have to go to.
And you need to work that out with them, okay?
I didn't see that. But that's off the air. So in the meantime, for all of you guys, you know who you are.
You're not here anymore. I got to get these things out. We're going to have our regular conversations here publicly in front of everybody. I'm not going to see you.
About. Yeah. Adam, Donald, Phil, Sable, Henry, Jimmy, Chris, Emoji, Aaron, Minalita, Richard, Roberto, me want tacos. I had tacos twice today. I'm not going to lie. Can't help. Henry, Donald, Hirochinu, Manwith, Holly. I'm going through this quick. Schultze, Jay, Colinello. If I'm missing anybody.
Did you say Sable?
Fersh, I said Sable. Mario. Aaron.
It's not Mario, it's Chromium.
Chromium? Why do you say Chromium?
I've told you that a million times.
Chromium Schmomium.
Chromium.
From the Netherlands. Dr. Van Nosten.
I love that we get the Euros over here. I mean, I'm so
impressed. That's one thing that Keaton and Russell do a good job of. They get such a huge swath of people from the UK that they actually do an afternoon show because they got so many people from Ireland.
I know, I'm so impressed that people are watching, but then again, people work different hours. I mean,
B-Stuff, David, Glenn, Jules. I'm really doing myself one tonight because we've had such a talkative and bigger crowd.
Yeah, no, it's good. And I'm glad that we get conservative people. I have no problem.
Yes.
Jimmy Zim Zam, thin or thick crust? You know what?
Thin.
Both.
Thin.
Both.
Thin.
Both. And
thin.
here's the both.
Thin.
It depends. It's contextual. Very nuanced situation.
Well, if you're talking about
I can get behind a Sicilian, I can get behind a deep dish. I can get behind all sorts of things if done properly. And I lived in Chicago, so I appreciate Chicago.
Well, that's what I'm
just saying. There's no either or.
Well, but remember, no, I understand that, Jen, but the big difference between Chicago and just about anywhere else is that when people think of deep dish you have to be very nuanced about it. You have to say, do you mean regular deep dish or do you mean Chicago style deep dish?
Well, and here's the thing. I like both. So what I'm saying is all can be good in the right context. And I reject that I have to make that choice. When someone said, that's not an either or. I like both. That's what I'm saying.
Well, if there's one thing we can agree on is that frozen pizza like Red Baron is not normal. I agree.
And I do my shares of frozen pizzas, but it's not that. I don't do that. I like the Paul Newman's frozen
How
pizza.
did I know you were going to say your biggest?
Because I do. I like that one that I like, that spinach one with the cheese, the ricotta.
Yeah.
But yes, and I love that. I love that company. So yeah.
If Paul Newman couldn't have been a more perfect man.
He could not have been. You are correct.
He could
not have been a more perfect.
He wasn't 100% Jewish, so I guess that's the one flaw I guess he had in his DNA. Smash that like button, share, subscribe, do all those things we ask you to do. We'll see you Thursday.